Welcome to Create Great. This podcast series features conversations with creative people from different backgrounds, from different disciplines, and different schools of thought. Thank you for choosing to listen. This podcast is hosted by me, David Bennett, Creative Director of APX Studio and Curator of Visual, an online showcase. The best creatives will always strive to create something great, and I wanted to explore how they go about this, what it means to them, their clients, and what it means to our wider society too. My guests are individuals whose work I've admired and often featured over the years on Visual, but I wanted to create this podcast to get to know the real people behind their creative work. I'll be asking questions about their own unique stories of how they got to where they are now, how much of it was perseverance and determination, or how much of it was just plain luck, and how do they go about creating something great. This is a chance to explore what drives these talented individuals or their studios to create great. Today's podcast guest is Thomas Kurppa, Chief Creative Officer and co-founder of the superb Kurppa Hosk. With offices in Stockholm and New York, they collaborate with brave organizations from early stage startups to some of the world's most admired companies. Welcome, and thanks for joining me today on our first podcast of 2023. Really just thinking about the work you do and everything, and I was just actually trying to remember when I first came across the work of Kurppa Hosk, and it's got to be more than 10 years ago. But I always remember seeing it and being blown away by it, going, okay, never heard of these guys. These are really interesting. And, you know, that's kind of the thing when I do with the Visual is I see stuff or something comes in my inbox or whatever, and I go, oh, wow, this is really interesting. I just wanted to sort of talk about and step back through your kind of career and how you got to form your own studio as well, and sort of talk some of the typography. So maybe if we sort of jump back to that career of deciding to start your own studio, it'd be great to understand what made you do that.
Yeah, it's if we're talking about Kurppa Hosk, in a way, it was just like a coincidence in the beginning of 2009,
Right.
and it was actually not planned at all. I used to run an agency in the 90s together with my colleague Mons Hosk, who's my co-founder of Kurppa Hosk as well, but I used to work at Stockholm Design Lab for many years, and I quit Stockholm Design Lab around 2007 or 8 somewhere, and started to freelance, and didn't actually know really what the next step would be. So we're doing a lot of freelance work together with Mons, who's more of a copywriter and client lead and strategist. So we were doing some work together, and by coincidence we were invited to a pitch for a very big telco in the Nordics, one of the biggest, and we didn't really have a legal registration number or anything, so we were the hopes for winning that was quite low. But by some strange reason, we because I was actually starting at another design agency who was also in the pitch at the same time. So I think I was there for 5 days, and on the Friday, Mons called me and said we actually won this.
Oh, wow.
So that's the reason why we actually started Kurppa Hosk, and my sister was also involved in this pitch. So she was the first employee, basically a co-founder. She as well. So really strange, actually, how Kurppa Hosk was formed, or the idea behind it was really just a coincidence. So it's quite funny when you look back on these 13 years that it was like, I guess, like life can sometimes, it just happens. So no plan at all.
Wow. Yeah. That does sound like, well, it sounds like you've got a bit of a family business and a bit of a friend business as well, which is great. Really, really
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Many have asked me over the years, how can you work? Or maybe they've asked my sister more, how can you work with your brother? It sounds like a nightmare. But I think we have established a great relationship work-wise as well. We do different things, and
Hmm.
it's not that often that we work, in the projects together. So I think that's one of the reasons.
And when I was just sort of looking into it, I was amazed how big you guys are. I didn't realize that. You got your New York office, then probably the Stockholm office is like where it's kind of founded and built up, and I think it's like 80 employees. I was like amazed. I was like, couldn't
Yeah,
believe it.
it's almost like when you look back at it, it's also nothing that we planned. We've been growing quite organically, and I think historically, it's, at least in Scandinavia, agencies in design haven't been that big. It's quite unusual, and I
Mm,
think my biggest fear when we were quite smaller was that it's hard to keep the quality when you're growing. And I was, I guess, looking at an agency size of perhaps 30. I think that would be the maximum, maybe for keeping that quality. And over the years, I just discovered that it's all about people. So if you're 80 excellent people or eight, it doesn't matter basically. It's just like harder to find these people
mm.
when you become bigger. But it's basically all about people, I would say. And the luxury of being 80 and almost 40 designers is that you can actually have a lot of expertise in house. So you can have, as we have now, typography, 3D skills, motion, brand, digital. So it's so rewarding to have that team, that quite big team. We can experiment and we can try out things easier, I guess, than shop stuff, from other sources. So that's been really beneficial for us.
And I think your recent project, which I featured, as you mentioned, I think is a real pulling on those strengths. The Tug Burgers work that you guys have just released. That I would
Yeah.
like to talk about the typography, and the motion is definitely something that you guys are sort of leading and everything else. But I suppose the typography and actually thinking about your own personal Instagram feed.
Mm.
A lot of people ask me where I get the time to do the visual, all the other bits, and it's like, hold on a sec, Thomas, where do you get your time to do it? Because it seems there's obviously a crossover, but it definitely feels like managing 80 people, 40 designers, and doing your own Instagram stuff. Is that the Instagram the spark of an idea for something, or is it just pure personal work?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think for me, I always been experimenting with especially typography. It's like a personal passion. So I guess I'll do that quite fast when I have spare time. So it's like a hobby as well. Maybe
Hmm.
like you do other stuff, maybe like reading books, or I don't know what you can be interested in. But for me, it's always been these explorations. Or I'm coming from a background where I created like electronic music,
Right.
so I was spending a lot of time, almost like every minute I could get into like the sequencer and experimenting with electronic music. So I think that is basically the transition into that. Like I really love. It's almost like something that keeps me calm. Sometimes I'm just I don't have any brief. I'm just free to explore different curves in Illustrator, and I think that is just like something that can keep me occupied with my own thoughts. Or so it's just like a priority, I guess, how you spend your spare time.
Yes. And with all of this, I, obviously like to sort of jump back into how you actually got into creativity, into design, or whatever the construct is. So, if we go back to the beginning, when did it really enter your life? When was creativity or design? You thought, oh, this is interesting. This could take me somewhere, or this fulfills me.
It's a strange journey in a way. I was my upbringing. I was brought up in a small town called Ljusdal. That is basically like Light Valley. It's in the center of Sweden. A lot of woods, forests, and lakes, and it's kind of a small industrial village. So design and graphic design was not really something that anyone talked about or were interested in. So I
Yeah.
didn't know about graphic design when I was in my teens. So it started basically that I in the around like the late 80s I was just drawn into coming from the Depeche Mode and Kraftwerk. When I was younger, I discovered the new scene when it come to electronic music, and from Chicago house music and Detroit techno. So that was basically how I was just blown away, and started to DJ a lot around my town and the neighborhoods. So that's how I was drawn into that underground scene. And at the time, you didn't have any internet, so it was quite hard to get influences and inspiration. So I traveled a lot down to Stockholm and bought these 12 inches and just looked at them at the train back, and then was DJing as much as I could. And when
Yes.
and at this time as well, I was just trying with a copy machine, doing small flyers and posters, and so that was perhaps the first attempts, small steps into graphic design. And the day after I finished my high school education, I moved to a bigger city up north in Sweden, and we started a small underground label. And we gathered with some friends, so we bought a lot of equipment, which was super expensive at the time.
Yeah.
There were no such things as plugins and software, so you really needed to buy a mixer and all these effects and synthesizers. So it's a lot of difficulties just to afford these machines. And we started to release techno music and house music in the early 90s, and we couldn't afford any designers, so I was just like starting to play with different softwares
Right.
like Photoshop and Illustrator. I think Freehand was also like the competitor of
Yeah.
Illustrator at the time. And from there, I just discovered, all the heroes I had from Neville Brody, Peter Saville, Designers Republic, Mark Farrow, and all of these. Because at that time, also like record sleeves was the almost the channel to the world, since you didn't have internet. So that was basically where you a platform for to discover great graphic design. And after a while, I just was discovering that I was spending more time doing sleeves than making music. So that was the transition, I guess, into graphic design for me. And I realized I needed an education. So from there, I just applied to different design schools in Stockholm in the early 90s. And yeah, at that period also discovered like the true heroes from the modernism era, like Total Design and the Swiss school, basically. So I would say the early 90s was really defining for me, and also the entry ticket into graphic design.
Yes. And just going back to the music, do you still make music, or is it just sort of in the background?
I do. I mean, for some case things, case music, I do a lot for Kurppa Hosk.
Oh,
But
brilliant.
yeah, but it's
I didn't realize. Okay, I'm going to listen to that more often now.
yeah, but tapping into your question around time, I don't have any. I need to prioritize. So I think I do more visual stuff, experimental stuff than music nowadays. But I have so many sketches laying around from Ableton Live, for example, just that is actually not going to be finalized. So just for fun, I would say. But it's really easy to fall into the trap that you do a lot of sketches, and then the day after you start with something new, so you never finish a track. Yeah, it's just fun, I think, too. As you, David, I guess you're playing the guitar for the same reason.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was going to say, how do you know? They're all sort of hidden out the back there, and so
Yeah,
many in the studio. But yeah, that's my that was my sort of teenage, how to stay in as a teenager kind of thing, just to focus
yeah.
down on. And yeah, I do find.
It's really connected as well. I mean, music and design, it's so
Mm,
close related.
yeah, I think a lot of us are frustrated musicians.
Yeah, exactly. And the jamming phase, I think, just for me at least, was so similar. Starting a blank sequencer, starting with the kick drum, and from there you didn't know where it should end. So I think sometimes just a blank slate in Illustrator is the same thing, and you have bass and treble and black and white, and you need to
Mhm.
find the dynamics and the balance of everything. I think, and also we talk a lot about, we try to divide sometimes like the toolbox into heroes and dynamic elements. So the heroes in the toolbox is usually, the identifiers like the logotype or symbol
Mhm.
that needs to be very strong. And sometimes, I mean, the things you remember from an identity is basically the hook in a song. You need to have a hero element that you, in a song, it could be some whistle or a chorus line from, it could be something that is so significant for that track or song. And I think in graphic design it's the same thing. You need to remember something. So these hero elements is basically the same, I would say, like or the parallel I see through very close parallels to music.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's interesting. Now, thinking about your work, there, if you think about rhythm, even the way the site is built and how everything's sort of coming up, uh, knowing that, I can see it really working well together. I'd
Yeah.
like to talk a bit about your influences because we're going to a quick fire round, and one or two are actually on there. So you mentioned Neville Brody.
Mm,
When did you first see him? Was that through the Face magazine, or was that?
yeah.
Yeah,
Face, it was hard to get hold of where I, from the small city I grew up in, but that was definitely the experimental type explorations was something I was super intrigued by. And Neville Brody, and then basically, stuff that came out from England, and the music. I think that was my first, like, just, what do you say, like, it was so such a huge impact, I think,
mm,
for me. And especially designers that was working with typography in a different way. I never been really into photography combined with in graphic design. I
yeah,
never based my work on photography really. We do that, of course, in Kurppa Hosk sometimes, but personally, I've always been more intrigued by letter shapes and
yes.
headlines and stuff like that. Also, like American stuff from the 70s, perhaps. But I don't know why. It's just like very almost like sculptural, which interests me.
Hmm. Hmm. I also think just looking at when you mentioned the black and white, and it's one of those and I think black and white, and I think the forms of the typography or the logo type or the typeface really it's the purest, isn't it? As soon as the color emotion, a bit of color, the emotion comes into it. But I was
Mm.
intrigued by that, the idea of almost your canvas board being the music, the drum pads, and it all being the black and white. You think
Yeah,
about, because the score, that's black and white, so there seems to be
it's
almost a
so
visual
similar.
world. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost like sometimes like colors are like strings. It's like a pad underneath. But for me, it's usually something very graphical in front of that, like the things I remember. So we have a lot of supporting elements, supporting roles, but as in music, but it's sometimes you can just strip it down, and almost like the good songs you can play at just a guitar, because the melody or the hook is so clear. So I think the same goes for graphic design. If you think of FedEx, for example,
Hmm.
you usually think of the color combination perhaps and the logotype in itself. That's the core ingredients, the hero elements, and you can pick hero elements in every great identity, I think, as you could do with great music. So it's just like fascinating, I think, to and that's something we practice a lot as well. Like sometimes we start with the hero elements. We don't start with a concept,
Right.
because if you do that, sometimes you end up with a concept, but when you really examine the ingredients, you can just discover like that the heroes are not there. It looks great. It's like a soup that looks fantastic on in an image, but when you actually taste it, the ingredients could be better. So we try to divide sometimes the process into creating the hero elements together with different concepts that we benchmark these heroes against. So it's something that we're really trying to push.
Right. Yeah. And I was going to ask your sort of, not your average working day, but as the sort of chief creative officer, and obviously you got family connections as creative directors and stuff like that. What does your day look like? Is it just like back to back kind of things, having a bit of space? Fascinated to know how you actually manage all that kind of team underneath you as well.
Yeah, that's been a journey as well. I think when you're growing, you have different stages, like different phases. Like one can be like 20 people, 40 people, 60 and 80. I think it's really clear, and you need to adjust every time when you grow. You need to change the organization and how you work. But when you're 80, at least for me, it's I don't need to be involved in everything at all. I just have conversations with all the creative directors on a weekly basis, and of course, we meet in the studio all the time to discuss stuff around the wall and have the conversation going. But I think it's super crucial to have these great creative directors that I have the dialogue on a daily basis with and a weekly basis, and then just going around in the studio and look at things. Not that I are involved or have the responsibility for that project. It's more of the creative director who steers that project. But just to creatively, it's more like creating a scene where everyone feels comfortable, and we are. I used to say like we should be all, if we're best friends and we have this secure area where you feel trust and you really can take risks.
Yes.
That's the main purpose, I guess, for me. I'm going to set the scene, but I'm not going to perform on it. It's more like to create this culture and the open environment that we have.
And do you,
Sorry, David, but
yeah.
I mean, otherwise, this is a lot of client meetings and a lot of meetings back to back, and also taking care of the future vision for Kurppa Hosk as well, like where we're going, what's the next step, and so forth.
Wow, yeah, because I did notice that you're part of the ARC group and stuff. And how did that come about? Because that's almost like you've set up your independency, and then you're now part of something. Was that a business decision kind of thing to get new clients in and stuff like that?
It was in a way. I mean, me and Mons felt after 10 years that we always been quite curious and I guess also taking a lot of risks. So I guess one way could be just to continue with Kurppa Hosk in the same way we've always been doing it. But we felt this was like 2018 or 19 that we really wanted to see if we could expand even more. So we actually just to see how far can we take Kurppa Hosk and the approach we have to design. And it was just a great opportunity when we met ARC, because their ambition is to create this great group with different experts, basically. So everyone is focused on their business, but we work very closely together. So now we can embrace bigger clients and more complex problems together with other expertises from ARC. So we still have our own name and our own identity and the culture, but we all are working from the same building, which is great. So it's just like these collaborations are, appears very naturally, and we can work together. We can bring in expertise from other companies into a specific project. So it's just great, and the experience so far has been exceeding all expectations, to be honest.
Oh wow, brilliant! And I always like to know, because over your career, there must have been some great parts of a project and some real sort of, oh my god, what's happened here on a project, and it's sort of navigating and steering that. And what's been the best part, or what do you see as the best part of the project, and what do you see as the worst part of a project?
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky question, I think, in a way, because I guess for me it's always been super excited. I always been super excited in the beginning because in the creation phase, the idea phase, when everything is open and no doors are basically closed, and we have this ambition together with the client that we should create the, you know, the dream they have for this project. How could we articulate that? So I guess that would be the best part, when everything is just open and no one knows exactly
Where
what
it's
this is
going,
going to
yeah.
be. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you never know, you know, something extraordinary is perhaps waiting around the corner. So it's just like, I love that period of time when everything is just like a question mark. So I think that I don't have like any worst parts, I guess, from a project. I think it's more like, personally, I'm quite restless, so I really want to be in a lot of buckets
Mm-hmm.
at the same time. But and also when you're 80 people, it's great because you have so many different profiles and areas of interest. So
Yeah.
I mean, assets are super important in the beginning, but I mean, further down the line, you know, the system, how everything is connecting, coming together, and taking these decisions to make sure that this identity is going to hold, you know, you know, when you see the pattern of the identity, and people, we have people that are specialized in that as well. So I think that is the great thing of being so many, that you can make sure that we have experts on every phase in the project as well. So I think that's just for me at least, it's not about more like better or worse parts. It's just like different phases.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to now jump to the quick fire round
Mhm.
just to break it up a bit. Right. So I'm going to ask you two things. Just pick one.
Okay.
Okay. Quick fire round. Form or function?
Form.
Sans or serif?
Sans.
Brody or Brockman?
It's a tricky one. That is super tricky. I would say Brockman then.
Right. Then InDesign or Illustrator?
Illustrator.
And then I put this on there. Hockey or football?
Hockey, definitely.
Because I wanted to talk to you about the hockey, because the hockey, you've obviously, typography, as we've established, is key. Fantastic at it. You've recently opened up your own type foundry, and
Yeah.
the helmet. I was like, does Thomas like hockey? Hopefully it's real. Hope it's not all Photoshop, because I thought that was lovely. What led you to do the sort of open up your own foundry? Was it something you've been thinking about for a while, or just you've had these sketches and now you want to bring them to life?
Yeah. We Jacob, our font guy, he typographer. He was. We were speaking about this for many years, like 3 years, I think. That would be, it would be great, since we're heavily focused on type. We loved Everyone loves type. I mean, and it's also very often an essential ingredient in our identity. So we just thought it could be interesting to start our own foundry, and it's quite unusual, I think, perhaps if you're an agency, that you can provide more typefaces than just for your own sake, like for our own project. So we were just thinking it could be nice to open up, just to sell retail fonts as well, but
Yeah.
also actually collaborate with other agencies, that we can actually help them with typography if they don't have that resource themselves. So that was just the idea more fun than business, I would say. But yeah, it took some years to get that together. But hopefully we can continue to develop different typefaces that we can sell or distribute, and then also help other agencies or clients with bespoke type.
Mm-hmm. And is that obviously now it's like a service? And how many projects have you actually sort of created bespoke typefaces for? Because when we go back to the sort of the heroes, the logo, and everything else, it's that classic brand conversation where you come around about people trying to say, let's own a color, and it's like, good luck. Don't know what color you're going to own, but I do think typography, you can own type, and I think that's something when we're going back to APX Studio, when we sort of had a bit of a reshift, is that was the initial question. Like, we had color, and it's like, you can't have color, let's have type, and we created our own typeface. And I think selling that in to clients, and obviously now you've got Jacob there as a team, is that something you pursue in everything? Do you create something and go, actually, let's create something bespoke just to show them as a way to create that individuality, so they don't have to be, what color are we, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite. I mean, it's tempting for us since we have that in house, of course,
Yes.
to do something bespoke. But it's also, I mean, it needs to be. We need to find a reason for that. But yeah, I mean, typography can definitely be an asset that the client can work with, and have a very strong element that is not actually a logotype, but still sends very strong brand signals. So that is one thing. I mean, the uniqueness is one thing that we can talk about with the client, but recently also there's another maybe financial reason for bigger clients, at least, that are facing a lot of, I mean, costs when it comes to licensing typography.
Yes.
And some business models are based on the number of hits you have on a site, for example. So it can become quite expensive after a while. So sometimes it could also be actually a pure financial reason to do that, because we can do it quite fast, and it's so much easier now. Just looking back 15 years when I created my first bespoke fonts for clients, it was, I mean, 2 weights were super expensive. So I think, I mean, the competition has increased, and it's just like not that strange or dramatic anymore to create your own font for a client. So I think we've done that perhaps like 25, 30 times so far.
Brilliant.
In-house. Yeah.
I'm just going to jump back to the hockey. Do you play hockey?
I wish, but I'm too old now. But I used to when I was young, and I come from up north, and my mother is from a town in the middle of Sweden where a lot of my relatives comes from. And when I was young, I was introduced to the club Brynäs, which is from Gävle. So I was just like from a very early age really interested in ice hockey, and in Sweden it's quite big as well. It's like perhaps like Canada and Finland.
Yes.
So it's just something. And then when I in my teens, I lost interest because you have so many other stuff going on. But then after a few years, I just like came back to it, and I love watching it because it's so fast. It's the fastest team sports in the world. So it's just like, it's a brilliant TV entertainment.
Yeah. I was going to say, surely you'd like to brand one of the teams,
which we have. We actually.
Oh, have you?
This is so it's super funny because I live in an apartment here in Stockholm, and a few years back someone was knocking on my door, and a guy, I opened, and he said like, my son, who was like 4 at the time, he had the jersey, my favorite team's jersey on, and he saw that, and he asked me if I could help him to carry. He bought something at an auction or something, big furniture. So can you help me to carry this thing up to the 4th floor? And I said yes, of course I can help you. And then we after I did that, we just started to have a conversation around everything. And he just, are you into Brynäs? And I said yes. That's funny because I work with Brynäs, and we recently have done something for Djurgården, as another Swedish club. And he said like, we should definitely have lunch. And after a month or so, he just reached out and said he was the CEO in the club. So we started to redesign the badge and the jersey in itself, with the numbers and everything. So everyone thought I was like forcing myself into that because I love that club so much, but it was just again like a coincidence. So it's just funny how things can work out sometimes.
Yeah. I've just gone on the site and had a look at that, and I've just realised, probably when the first time I came across your work was the unit
All right,
portables,
yeah, yeah,
the
the bags.
which I've got one. Yeah, I've got one
Yeah.
downstairs. But go on. I was like, what? So that was probably the first time many
Mm.
years ago on the Visual site that I first came aware of you.
Is
Was that a self-initiated thing, or was it?
Yeah, I think it was around 2011, perhaps, and
Right.
it was a Swedish guy that came to us with an idea of he wanted to create a computer bag basically, and he had some sketches
Yes.
which didn't look, to be honest, that good. So we said like we can help you, but it was like kind of a sweat equity deal. So we said like we can also try to design the bag in itself because we need to lift that a bit. So it started like a collaboration initiated by him, but we discovered quite soon because we started to draw like sketches in Illustrator and we sent it to China, and we got samples back that looked horrible. So it took some time just to we needed to bring in someone that was good in construction and stuff, but we managed to do that first bag with the Gala system. You have small bags on the front of the bag, and then the label in
Yeah.
itself became a true hero because that was very informative,
Yeah.
which was quite unusual at the time as well. So it started like that, and we sold like 50,000 units of that first bag. So it spread quite fast, that bag, I think, and a lot of designers had it. So I have a few myself left, but the company, which is a shame, doesn't exist anymore. It was bought up and then acquired and then just disappeared. But
Ah.
it's a super fun project.
I thought it. Yeah. I thought when because I had it, and I thought, hold on a sec. Then I spoke. I was like, so I carry a little bit of
Yeah,
Kurppa Hosk with me everywhere. You're always on my
yeah,
back.
always
There you
watching
go.
you.
There you go. Brilliant. So, and I think you kind of touched upon it. With so the whole point of doing these podcasts is obviously the visual and the OPX side of it. And the OPX side, this whole thing was about creating great. It was a bit of a mantra moment where it was like, hold on, how can we keep the work being so inspiring and the ambition of everything? And it really helped us sort of
Mhm.
raise the bar because we were conscious of we didn't want to be one of those sort of pick and mix website kind of things. We wanted just like the best work on there. So internally and externally, it looks great and it helps the clients as well. I was going to ask you, what's the thing that motivates you, and is there sort of like a greatest moment where you've created something and you've seen the impact and you've gone, ah, that's what it's about, really.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think also this, how you get motivated is something that changes, I guess, over time. When I started, I was just like, I couldn't do anything else than spending all these hours in Illustrator, and even if I didn't have any, ongoing work, I just created stuff for fun. And I think when you also grow the agency, you see it evolve, it becomes something else, and you also find yourself in a different position. You have a different role. You're maybe not as hands-on as you were in the beginning. So you need to find different keys, I guess, to make sure that, especially now for me, it's how
Hmm.
can Kurppa Hosk evolve in the right direction. So I think for me at least, it's been what really ticks and make me motivated is to see all these younger designers coming in and develop Kurppa Hosk. That is really my reward, I would say, and also to make sure that we have
Hmm.
this. Um, I can contribute to make sure that we have this platform that everyone feels safe, and we become best friends. I would say, like, yeah, that is really my mission right now, and it's been the last years, I guess, to make sure that we can create this culture that we always have. And I think culture is always changing, but for me at least, that is my highest priority, to make sure that we take risks and
Yeah.
explore the unknown now and then. And I'm also trying to promote like mistakes, and yeah, and to be able to show even ugly stuff, wrong stuff. All that
Hmm.
motivates me really at a high level. The team in itself, and to see all these younger designers really spark.
Yeah. And is there a bit of advice that during your journey to where you are now that has sort of stuck with you, that you sort of go back to and pass on to the young juniors or anyone within the studio?
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about, and I try to inspire them also by making or like trying to explain as well, like the need for experimentation, and that you, as far as you can, you should do that, on a personal level as well.
Hmm.
And make sure that we also like mistakes, I guess, has always been, also looking back all the great projects, the ones that stick out in a way, like we're talking about Tag as well, was also an experimentation with 3D in the beginning. So it's
Hmm.
just like no idea that we would end up there. It was just like playing around with different 3D softwares, and suddenly you have something. So I usually bring up this, even if you're not into 3D, for example, like
Yes.
3D software. I mean, I usually bring up this reference to Roland. The TB303 is a small plastic box that is. It came out, I think it was around 82, and they released that synthesizer as a solution for studios that couldn't afford the bass player. So this little machine was supposed to sound like a bass player, a real bass player, and
Right.
it
Yeah.
sounded like everything else than a bass player. So it was just funny how that machine just died in the beginning of the 80s. No one touched it because it was, just horrible. And then 86, someone picked it up that was haven't read the manual or, the instructions, treated it in a different way, in a way it wasn't supposed to be treated,
Hmm.
and invented acid music, acid house. So I think it's just like sometimes, just as we trying here at Kurppa as well, not be afraid of doing wrong, or we don't have the skills sometimes, but we by that, you can also come into areas where the unexpected happens. So I think that is something we talk about a lot as well. Like if we have this friendship, we all best friends, we can show stuff that are so way out sometimes, but no one is thinking that is wrong. It's just like good, and everything should be on the wall, even mistakes. That because you find something in that,
Yeah.
somewhere
Yeah.
in that mess of stuff, you can find a beautiful diamond.
Absolutely. I was just looking at and thinking, music is obviously really coming through, which is brilliant, and thinking about actually the interface
Mm,
designs of different drum machines and everything else, how that might have subconsciously, when you're younger, influenced your kind of design approach to it, really stripped back, probably black and
mm,
white or white out of black with maybe a hint
yeah.
of color and obviously typography.
You mean like the software, like the
Yeah,
hardware in
like
itself?
the actual hardware, the actual keyboard kind of thing, the all the knobs and the volume, thin line to thick line and everything
Yeah,
else. Whether that's might have been
I,
some of the inspiration as well.
definitely. And I think the scene in itself, I mean, just underground music, electronic music, has always been, in a way, I don't know why, but it's always been, you know, like touching the industrial side of things. It's like Warp did as well,
Hmm.
and electronica. It was, in a way, it was really. as far as possible from the romantic side of things. So it's just like almost like graphic design. Like Helvetica was perfect for techno because it was kind of cold. The machines were speaking. So I think that influenced me as well, subconsciously. I guess it did. And also, as you say, David, like hardware in itself looks very strict, very functional,
Yes.
based on a system. So definitely, I think that is super true.
Brilliant. Well, we're sort of coming up to time, and I just wanted to thank you, Thomas, for coming on. It's been brilliant, and it's almost that thing of seeing things connecting, just understanding how you work as a studio and as an individual. That music side coming in, it makes total sense now, and
Okay.
which is brilliant, which is
Yeah.
really interesting as for myself and hopefully for the listeners. But yeah, no, honestly, thank you for taking time. I know you're super busy and everything, and you're kind of like on the hit list of, I really want to talk to this person. So
No, thank you, David, and my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. It was super interesting to have this conversation. So thanks.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I look forward to you coming back for the next one. If you'd like to find out more about OPX and how we create great, then check out opx.studio. And if you'd like some daily inspiration in your life, then do visit visuel.co.uk. And if you enjoyed this episode, head over to Spotify and give us a follow.